Good evening. Thank you for your patience. We'd like to welcome you to our August 2nd, 2018 Town Council meeting. This is the first meeting of our fiscal year 19. Amazing to think that we're already here. We are grateful for all of you who have come and weathered the storm, literally, to be here. So we apologize for anyone that got caught, but you're in a nice air-conditioned space now, so we'll keep you here, but not too long. And we'd like to thank Councilmember Cook and have him introduce the Scouts tonight.
Yeah, so if we can have our Scouts come up here to the front with me, I appreciate it. And we're going to have Trevor, is that right? Come right here next to me, Trevor. He'll lead us in a pledge. So can we all please rise? And there's our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and with liberty, justice for all.
Well, how wonderful is that? Thank you, Trevor. Usually what we do is we ask that our Scouts introduce themselves and tell us like what rank they are and what pack. And then I have a gift to give you on behalf of the council.
My name is Trevor Simmons, and I am a star.
I'm Trent Buckner, and I'm first class.
I'm Levi Jarman. I'm first class.
I'm Zach Iverson, and I'm first class.
Thank you. We have a gift for you. It's a pocket U.S. Constitution. It's something that you're going to have to read. And then we'll give you a test when you come back the next time. Would that be all right? Can we have a round of applause for our Scouts here? Thank you.
Councilmember Cook, since we did have some other Scouts come in, and I would imagine they were stuck in that storm, would it be okay if we had them come up real quickly as well? We want to make sure their moms see them on TV.
Yes. Can we have all the other Scouts come up, please? You just come right up to the front, and even your leaders, since you're wearing a Scout uniform, and we'll have you tell us and introduce yourselves and what troop or pack you're in. Come right next to me right here. All right. Just your name, rank, pack, troop, and then I have a gift for you.
I'm Maddox Dutro, and I'm part of Troop 780 and Star Scout.
My name is Caden Trejo, Troop 780, and I'm a star rank.
All right, I'm Rusty Thatcher. I'm the Scoutmaster in Troop 780.
I am Ryan Judd, Scout Assistant and 780.
I'm Matt Llewellyn with Troop 780, and I'm an Assistant Scoutmaster as well. Thank you.
All right, can we give these folks a round of applause as well? Thank you for coming.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our Scouts and their leaders who do so much for the town. We appreciate you. At this time, we'd like to introduce Reverend Scott Jones to offer our invocation. Reverend Jones is from Resurrection Episcopal Church. Thank you for being here tonight.
Is this mic working? Thank you, Mayor Daniels and councilmen. I am Scott Jones. I'm the priest and pastor at Resurrection Episcopal Church. And our church is a relatively new church that meets in one of the town's facilities at the Senior Center every Sunday, so we thank you for that. And I promise to keep this sweet and to the point. Let us pray. Almighty God, send down upon those who hold office in this town of Gilbert the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Jones. We appreciate you. At this time, the clerk will conduct the roll call.
Mayor Jen Daniels.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bridget Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Scott Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Eddie Cook.
Here.
Councilmember Victor Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Jordan Ray.
Here.
Councilmember Jared Taylor.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you, Lisa. At this time, we do not have any presentations and proclamations formally posted on our agenda, but it is with a heavy heart that I notify you of the passing of our battalion chief, Chief Nelson, and how sad we are for him and for his family and for our entire Gilbert Fire family. And at this time, I would ask that you join me in a moment of silence to remember him and the great life he has led, and also to remember his family. Thank you, and thank you for joining me in that. Extra prayers or thoughts for our firefighters and their family would be terrific. Thank you. At this time, we will invite communications from citizens. Vice Mayor, do we have any tonight? Thank you. So we will move to the consent calendar. Certainly. I understand there's several people here for agenda item 26. Thank you. At the last moment, we have decided to postpone that agenda item. So for those of you that came tonight, I apologize. It was a last-minute decision after we realized that there was quite a bit of discussion that still needed to be had and some win-win solutions that we need to explore. And so I wanted to give you all a heads up. There will be no public hearing on that agenda item. Of course, you're welcome to stay, but we didn't want to waste anyone's time as well. So when that item does come up, as part of our public hearing. In fact, maybe we'll just take care of that now. We will continue agenda item 26 to date certain. September 6th, I believe, is our next council meeting. Is there a motion and a second for that?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote. That motion carries, and agenda item 26 has been continued until September 6th. So thank you again, and I apologize for the late notice. Expect to hear from us, though. We will use these to reach out to you to make sure that we get some more dialogue. And we do have emails and others that we can communicate with you all on. Thank you. To the consent calendar.
Yes, Mayor. Okay, I'm going to give it a shot. Bear with me. On the consent agenda this evening, we would like to, I would like to move to approve item number 1, item number 2, 3, 3A, 4, 4A through D, 6, 7A and B, 8A and B, 9, 10, 11, A, B, C, D, 12, and 15. And I would like to move item 31, which is the appointment of a member to the IDA. Would you like to handle that, council member?
Adding to the motion, I move to appoint as one regular member to the Industrial Development Authority to fill the remainder of a term beginning in August 2nd, 2018 and ending in March 12th, 2023, Kevin DeRosa.
And I would also move item 32, a motion to appoint Seth Bonda and Les Smith as regular members of the Planning Commission with terms beginning September 30th, 2018 and ending September 29th, 2022, and to appoint Phil Alibrandi and Jim Torgeson as alternate members to the Planning Commission with terms beginning November 15th, 2018 and ending September 29th, 2019.
Second?
And just one quick note, you actually mentioned that agenda item 6 was moving forward, but we actually want to pull 5 and 6. It's my understanding.
Okay, I didn't have 6, I apologize. I'm pulling 5 and 6 then. But I will amend my motion as stated.
Thank you.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. That motion carries with a 7-0 vote. Thank you. I believe that takes us to agenda item 5. Thank you. No, we've continued 5. 5 and 6 are continued. That takes us to agenda item 13.
Mayor, thank you. I'm just bringing my notes up here. Mayor, I apologize. I think I got this mixed up with another one. So I will, if you're okay, just move to approve it because I was thinking
Second.
item 13.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. That motion carries with a 7-0 vote. Thank you. Agenda item 14. Councilmember Peterson.
Mayor, thank you. So first of all, I just want to thank everyone for the additional time to kind of look at this. I also want to thank the staff for putting together a pro forma business plan, basically projecting out what this would look like. And that's a real positive and a very important step for me in deciding if we go forward with it. Certainly, the good news is the cost recovery projected here is quite a bit higher than what we would generally achieve at our other ball fields, at our other parks. And so I think that's a great thing. The biggest selling point for me, and has been repeated multiple times, about going forward with this facility and putting it back into the public use for our town, is to avoid building other ball fields that are currently planned. In other words, this would be a replacement of an expenditure in the future rather than in addition to. And without that deal point, it's a no deal for me. The challenge I still have, Mayor, is that staff has tried to help me with this, but every project they've pointed to as a possibility is something that's not in our CIP yet. It's not an official plan yet. And so it really, in my mind, there's no guarantee that this doesn't just become an addition, raising the level of service rather than a tool of maintaining it in a very cost-effective, fiscally conservative manner. I have some other ideas I've started to toss around with staff on how we might better assure that this would truly be a savings for the taxpayer. And I would beg the council for another couple weeks to see if they have potential. I've talked with Jacob Ellis. He seems to think 2 weeks could maybe still be okay, but we would be pretty much getting up against it after that. So, Mayor, if at all possible, I would beg for another couple weeks. And my preference is to move to continue one more time, if possible.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. Robert, looks like there's been head nods from staff to accept that as another couple weeks time to discuss. I do want to just make a quick note that we can never tie the hands of future councils either, though. And so if another council decides at some later point they want to build, 14 more parks in the town of Gilbert, that's their purview. So whatever we do, let's just keep in mind that the effort is to utilize this current facility to the best and highest possible best use that we can. And so I know that's your intent as well. I just want to make sure that's clear as we move forward.
Mayor, and thank you for that, because that's absolutely right. I would be satisfied if what we moved would require another vote of the council to undo. I certainly know that's always possible, but I'm hoping it would be something concrete enough that it would require another action of a future council to undo. And so I have an idea on that, and maybe that doesn't pan out, and in 2 weeks I'm stuck where I'm stuck, but I'd like to give it a shot.
Perfect. Thank
Mayor?
you. Yes.
I would, being the council to the parks liaison, I would like to attend those meetings as well.
I will certainly include you in those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to continue the item?
Mayor, I move to approve item 14 to the next regularly scheduled council meeting.
Second.
Move it. Not.
Councilmember Peterson, could you repeat yourself and just clarify that you move to continue rather approve?
I move to continue item 14 to the next regularly scheduled council meeting. I thought that's what I said, but you never know when the lights are in your face what you said.
They're dimming up here. It must be the storm too, so it's affecting us, right? Okay, good. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Please vote. That motion carries with a 7-0 vote. Thank you. That does move us to our public hearing items. All items will be heard at one public hearing, and we do have a request to speak on, I believe, agenda item 27. We will, and then agenda item, 24, 25. We've already handled 26, so we will do agenda item 24 and, okay. All right, so I will open the public hearing on agenda items 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, continue items 24 and 25 to September 6, 2018. Open the public hearing on 28, 29, 30, and I will close the public hearing on those agenda items and entertain a motion.
Move to approve, Mayor.
Second.
Please vote. That motion carries with a 7-0 vote. Thank you. That does move us to agenda item 27 this evening. And I have been given a Land Development Code Section 5.206 Public Hearing Procedures document here that I think will assist us as we do this. I will introduce the item. This is just a piece of education for all of us as we move through this process on agenda item 27. I think they gave this to me because apparently I don't always follow the Land Development Code, and I want to make sure I do that. We're rule followers up here. I will introduce the item, then we will open the public hearing. There will be a staff report. The applicant is welcome to speak at that time. Then we will accept public testimony from those requesting to be heard, and as of now, I believe we have one request to speak. The applicant can respond at that time. The staff can respond after that, and then we move forward through our regular scheduled procedures. So I just want to make sure that that was clear and that that is the process we will be following this evening for agenda item 27. So I will open the public hearing on agenda item 27 and invite staff to come present.
All right, good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Stephanie Bubenheim. I'm a planner too with the town of Gilbert. Tonight, this case, item number 27, is AP 18-03, an appeal of Dogtopia, which was under use permit case 18-04. This is an appeal of the conditional use permit to allow a kennel in the shopping center SC zoning district. And this site is located at 207 East Williamsfield Road. This is a bird's eye view of Gilbert Fiesta. So the site, just to give an overview, it is a Fry's shopping center. So there are a couple different uses such as Fry's, AutoZone, Freddy's, there's a KFC. And the Dogtopia proposal is on the northeast corner of the shopping center. So the shopping center is located on the southeast corner of Gilbert Road and Williamsfield Road. The surrounding zoning is the shopping center to the south and the west. North above Williamsfield Road is either single family 43 or Maricopa County Rural 43. And to the east, the zoning is SF10, which is part of the Legacy at Gilbert Commons subdivision. This item was taken to the Planning Commission on June 6th of 2018. The Planning Commission did vote for approval of the conditional use permit subject to 5 conditions in a vote of 6-0. I have listed the 5 conditions here. At the meeting, there was one neighbor that did speak against the request, and that was the HOA representing the Legacy at Gilbert Commons. So they were mainly concerned with dogs being outside in the proposed outdoor dog run and how many dogs would be out there at once, and the barking and the noise and how that would affect the neighbors in the subdivision. So after a lot of discussion and a lot of discussion about the outdoor dog run, Planning Commission did recommend to add condition number 5 that I highlighted in orange. So that was limiting how far the outdoor dog run could be past the building. So I'll show that on another slide so you can get an idea of what that looks like. So here is, oh, I do have a mouse. So here is the building. The Dogtopia product is proposing to take up the entire building. Right now, it is a multi-tenant office suites, and they do propose to do tenant improvements later on if this were to be approved to occupy the entire building, and an administrative design review would be required for the addition of this outdoor dog run, which was highlighted in red. This was submitted with the use permit, so per that condition, this would have to be modified, but this is showing the dog run being past this area, which was determined to be the edge of the building to the south. So just to clarify, because there was some discussion at the Planning Commission, this is the south wall of the building. There is an SES panel and a wall that blocks the SES panel, and that is why there is a little part of that condition that excludes the SES panel. That's pointed out here is trash enclosure, and there is an existing walkway that is part of the building, and part of that would be used with the outdoor dog run, so there would be some shade provided for the dogs. And then this is a floor plan, so north is looking to your left. This is the outdoor dog run, and the basis of the business is that it's a daycare facility, so you can drop off dogs for a couple hours or overnight, which classifies it as a kennel in our land development code, so it does require that conditional use permit. And for the layout of the site, there are 3 separate rooms, and they do organize those rooms by size of the dog, and the applicant will be able to explain that how the business works a little bit better, but they are taken out in turns by room every so often to the outdoor dog run so that they can have some time outside, and then they're brought back in. There's always a person outside with them, and there is a person during the day, during the hours of the operation that is at the site as well. All right, and then as part of the conditional use permit for under animal service regulations, there are a couple conditions that need to be met in order to have an animal service use. So I lay those out here. So for the first one, A, for setbacks, the outdoor dog run does need to be at least 100 feet away from any residential use of the district. So on this slide before you, this is the property line of a residential use and a district. And right now, the outdoor dog run is approximately 119 feet away from this property line. For B, for fencing, the outdoor run must have a minimum 6-foot fence. That is complying with their request. They are requesting to put in an 8-foot tall fence. And for prohibitions of outdoor boarding of animals other than livestock, that's not applicable to this scenario. And for primary building entrances, outdoor runs shall not be located within 25 feet of any building's primary entrance. And that is complying as well. The nearest building is the auto zone, and their entrance is on the west side of that building. So there was an appeal after the Planning Commission approval that was filed on June 15th, and that was appealed by a council member based on the concerns of the Legacy at Gilbert Commons HOA about mainly the barking noises and affecting the health, safety, and quiet use of the neighborhood. And there have been some updates on Dogtopia since that June 6, 2018 meeting. So a letter was provided to you all, and it is in your packet, by Willie Morris, the applicant's attorney. That was dated July 26, 2018. There was a noise study conducted, and the applicant will be able to explain that in more detail. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask myself. And there was also a letter of support from the Gilbert Chamber of Commerce in support of the Dogtopia use that was provided in your packet as well. So staff does recommend that the Town Council uphold the Planning Commission's approval of UP 1804 with the same findings of fact that the Planning Commission had listed. If you have any questions, I can answer them, or I can come back up later.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Councilmember Peterson?
I guess I'll ask, do we have someone from the public wanting to speak on this item?
We do.
Okay, has there been any change in feedback recently based on the sound study and other communications, or do we still have some public concern and opposition?
Mayor Daniels, Councilmember Peterson, there's still concern about the number of dogs being outside at once, and there's going to be barking, so that's the main concern. I haven't heard from any neighbors since that noise study was sent to the council members. There was another mayor that sent out an email this afternoon that the town clerk has provided to all of you up there from a different neighbor that was not at the meeting but is worried about the noise of the dogs barking.
Thank you.
Councilmember Anderson?
Stephanie, a quick question. In your research, did you look at similar uses in town? And if so, have we had any complaints about noise, those uses?
I personally have not found any issues with similar uses in town. I was looking for any sort of dog daycare, kennel use. Most of them are located in zoning districts that do not require the conditional use permit, so it'll be in the larger commercial areas and the light industrial. There are 2 other Dogtopia locations in Scottsdale and Arcadia. I believe we have a Scottsdale manager here tonight if they'd like to answer any questions. Those 2 are not located in close enough proximity to any residential. It's not neighboring the property line, so we don't have any feedback that would compare.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cook?
Quick question. I believe the ordinance today for barking dogs in a residential area may require 2 neighbors in order for code compliance for PD show. Is that the case for the situation? If a neighbor finds that the dog barking is too loud, do they need to have a second neighbor complain as well? I mean, how's that work in this case?
Mayor Daniels, Councilmember Cook, I'm going to have to ask our attorney, Chris Payne, if he has any objection. I can check with our planning manager, but off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
Mayor Daniels, Councilmember Cook, I'm looking right now. I'm not sure if it still requires 2 complaints or just 1.
Well, I'm just kind of curious because I know that the ordinance or the rules were that they didn't want a neighbor to fight another neighbor, and they continued to do that. That's why they wanted 2 neighbors. That's why I'm kind of curious what would be the process, for any of the neighbors in the neighborhood if that were to happen.
And I'll get back with you just a minute.
All right,
I've got
thank
the
you.
code right in front of me.
Right. Thank you,
Thank
Stephanie.
you.
And we'll come back to that question, Councilmember Cook.
I have a question. Do you want any sort of page on the slide up on the screen at all?
Requests for a special, how about leave the site plan, that, the one with the distance, that one. Yep, thank you. On behalf of the applicant?
Mayor and Council, thank you for your time. My name is Adam Baugh with the Morris, 25 East Arizona Biltmore Circle. I'm here on behalf of Tina and Brett Edenfield. They are the franchisees for Dogtopia. Tina and Brett, Gilbert residents, been here for many years. Kids grew up in schools here. She's worked at the school district, also worked as a management in large technology companies. So they're both longtime Gilbert residents, but they're also passionate about dogs. And depending on the outcome of today, we'll quickly know which of the 7 of you are cat people or dog people. So consider that. And I won't judge you if you're a cat person. Tina's certainly passionate about dogs, and I think as she was considering her second act in life and what things would bring her happiness and also gainful employment, she considered operating a doggy daycare facility. I think as you start to figure out what it takes to create your own facility and what rules implement and what type of procedures and pricing and all the things that go into starting your own business, she came across Dogtopia, and it wasn't an intent to franchise, but understanding how that model works, how they've operated, and how they have a tremendous track record gave her great confidence in working with that franchise rather than starting her own. And Dogtopia has a fantastic model, which I think hopefully gives you a little bit of confidence in not just her as the operator, but the larger overall franchise. Dogtopia has 70 existing stores across the nation, about 150 more in development. And the reason why I think that's important is because this isn't somebody trying to learn on the fly or trying to create rules as things come up. Those rules have been, and those policies and those procedures that are implemented at Dogtopia have been learned over time, over many experiences. And so as a result, you can trust that you have not someone who's trying to figure it out, but a system and a policy in place that actually allows us to operate compatibly. Dogtopia has a couple locations in Arizona already. One's in Scottsdale, the other one's in Arcadia area. But most important, I think, that is some of their community outreach programs that they do, both with service dog, veterans, literacy programs, and as well as some autism outreach. And so it's not just doing being a good franchise, but also partnering with the community in different ways. Here's the site plan, and I think what brings us to this question today is, in your town zoning ordinance, the Land Development Code, it allows these types of uses in shopping centers, and those uses are allowed, and it's subject to a conditional use permit. And our point of view of the conditional use permit is to really prescribe conditions to make sure it can operate compatibly. And as a result, the Planning Commission and this town council today has a chance to make sure whatever conditions are approved can help make that compatibility be maintained through the process. And as the Planning Commission evaluated this case, they had the chance to hear from both the applicant as well as the appellant, Mr. Torgerson next door. And this was the proposal that was before them today. It was an indoor facility with an outdoor run. And you've gone through that plenty with Stephanie. But the reason why I want to share that is because the Planning Commission came up with the, boy, you know, I wish I would have thrown that N on the other side of recommendation. That's okay. Planning Commission had a different approach. And they said, you know, some of that noise can travel, and it can travel a little that direction. But if we pull it back, you can pull it back to the boundary of the southern wall and the SES panel. That should help cancel that ability of noise travel. And so that was approved along with some other conditions regarding hours of operation. One of the things that we learned from this process, though, was to understand the greater concern. And so what I'll get into a little bit is some of the design changes that we made. See, we understood that perhaps even that concession made by Planning Commission might not be sufficient. And so in lieu of that, we've done a couple of things. We've pulled back our building. Pulled back our outdoor area so it actually comes to the southern end of the building and doesn't encroach beyond that area. In addition, we've installed 8-foot perimeter walls. At one point, they considered adding some windows along that wall to give light into that area, but realizing that there was a possibility or maybe a concern that a guest or a patron walking in might walk past that perimeter wall, the dog could see it through the window, and that might incite some activity. And so as a result, we've decided to not put any windows in that outdoor area. And it's also worth pointing out there are no windows on the western side of the property as well, the eastern side. And also at the end of the day, this use is partially covered under an overhang as well, so only a certain portion of it is exposed. What this does is it shows responsiveness to concerns that were previously shared. I think the reason why this case was appealed was to make sure that the applicant had adequate policies and procedures in place and was willing to do all the things necessary to optimize compatibility. And this is the first step to that endeavor. The second thing we did is went out and hired a noise consultant to go do some studies, some analysis on other existing facilities, some analysis of the existing ambient conditions, and to put together some projections, and then finally some suggestions. And so we hired Tony Sola. He's a fellow that this council is very familiar with. He's an acoustical engineer, has an incredible resume and experience, and is very credible in this analysis. And so what he did is he toured the Scottsdale facility, he toured the Arcadia facility, and was able to take some baseline measurements, and then also able to tour this facility, and then do some projections. And what he projected is that the noise level is measured both at the property line and then at the house, and then you make a projection on what it could be on the inside of the house. And so the good news is that at the end of the day, the interior of the house, based on the noise study that's been submitted to you, projects to be about 37 decibels, or dBA. And in the town of Gilbert, the noise standard is 55 during the day and 42, I believe, at night. So it's clearly within that range. I also want to point out that the hours of operation have dogs end at 7 p.m. in the outdoor area, and they only go out one more time at 9 p.m. for a potty break, but it's not a play area, so it's only a minute or two, and then they come back in. But that noise study to me is very persuasive because it shows that it's not just a perception, but it's reality, and it's evidence that supports that this can be operated compatibly. The other thing that I'll point out is the policies and procedures that we have in place here, and I think that was sort of understated or probably not explained as well at the Planning Commission hearing. So in addition to that noise study, they have a canine behaviorist that has more than 16 years and 27,000 hours of work and experience with this type of use and these types of animals. They have 2 staff outside at all times as well as staff inside. And the reason why it's dual staff is because if there's an incident where a dog is a nuisance barker, one staff member can take it inside while the other staff member is able to stay outside and monitor the pets. Any barking dog will be immediately removed, but there's always a chance to redirect attention as well. And it's like my own kids, when they consistently bark at me to do something for them, sometimes I just try to tell them, oh, quick, Sophia the First is on television, and that usually seems to work. At the end of the day, though, sometimes reorienting is helpful, but it's also training, it's modules, it's even courses. And through these modules that they have and the extensive protocols, she's not inventing them or creating them for the first time. These are all part of the Dogtopia brand and rules and procedures, something that's been tried and tested over and over again. We believe that those policies and procedures can prevent and solve what could otherwise be perceived as a nuisance barker. The other thing I'd like to point out is this isn't a matter of first impression. In fact, this is a use that is otherwise seen in the town of Gilbert, but probably many people aren't aware that they're there because they sort of operate very innocuously. There's at least 3 in the town and 1 on the edge of the town. There's a good example is Pete's and Max. It's just separated by the residence chamber by a railroad track, but the distance and proximity to that house is almost very similar to the conditions that we have today. And you'll note that on Pete and Max, for example, their outdoor area is closest to the residential homes. Here's another site. It's just north of Baseline Road at Val Vista. It's called Doggy District, and it's surrounded by residential on all its sides, in particular multifamily north and homes to the east and to the south. But somehow these facilities have been able to operate. There's also Paw Commons and Gilbert Dogs, so essentially 4 facilities all right next to residential in the town of Gilbert. We had a chance to check with co-compliance. There's no record of any nuisance complaints or calls related to odor or dust or noise, which I think is instructive and demonstrative that these uses can operate very closely and compatibly with residential areas. At the end of the day, I think this has significant benefits to the town. It does bring opportunities for job growth and revenue, but when I say job growth, I'm really talking about 8 or 9 small business employees. But it gives an opportunity, more importantly, to fill a vacant space, some space that's been vacant for 39 months. And I asked myself, why has this building been vacant for 39 months? I can't explain it. I don't know why it's been that way, but I know that vacant buildings aren't good for the town. They're not economically productive. Having a chance to put in a use there that can operate responsibly and compatibly is a fantastic opportunity. And based on the Planning Commission action, Ms. Edenfield had moved forward with the purchase of the property, so she's very excited to do this. At the end of the day, I look back and I think, well, why support this? Well, I think there's a lot of compelling reasons, and I'll end it with this. You've got a letter of support from the chamber. You have numerous business owners that we've had a chance to visit with in the shopping center who have all expressed support and excitement for that. More trips here helps support all the commercial businesses in that shopping center. You have a staff recommendation. You have a Planning Commission unanimous recommendation. You have a noise study that supports and rebuts the concern. And you have strong, robust policies that aren't being implemented on the fly, but have been proven through 70 different stores and hopefully 150 plus more very soon. We've also made some very positive design changes that weren't in front of the Planning Commission at the time. I had a chance to sit out there with Councilman Ray and tour the property and figure out what we could do to improve it. And one of those suggestions was to pull it back. One of those suggestions was to consider a taller wall with no windows. At the end of the day, it's a legal test, which we satisfy. This meets all the criteria for the CUP. It's not detrimental to health, safety, or welfare. It is supported by that sound study. This use is consistent with a shopping center zoning district. It is consistent with the general plan. It conforms to all the laws and ordinances of the town of Gilbert. I appreciate your indulgence tonight, and I understand there's probably a speaker or so on the other side, which we're happy to answer any questions now or after he gives his presentation.
Thank you, Adam. We'll at this time have our public input.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to invite Jim Torgerson down to the podium. And Jim, I think you know how this works. Just give us your name and city of residence, please, or town of residence.
Mayor, Council, I'm Jim Torgerson, Gilbert, Arizona. I am the closest resident and the president of the HOA that is affected. I'm glad they used Tony, because Tony and I had a long discussion, and he's the one that let me know that Gilbert's sound code is unique amongst the Maricopa County and that is flawed, allowing 55 decibels inside of a home. If you look 54 decibels, you can look this up as the average speaking volume. So you would be dealing with my voice in your room at that distance. That is an invasion of the quiet enjoyment of my property, if there ever was one. I don't even want to hear myself speak. I don't want to hear myself speak now, let alone hear a whole bunch of dogs speaking. There is a small health concern. A few of the neighbors at a meeting brought up parvo, and it's really not a grand concern. The scent of it is not a grand concern. I've looked at the business plan. They've addressed it fairly adequately. But the problem is the flaw with their own consultant is that it allows 55 decibels inside of my home. That's inside. I believe that when I moved to Gilbert 10 years ago and paid cash for my house, that I had a reasonable expectation of peace and quiet. Now, I realized I moved into a shopping center that had a teak woods. And during the Super Bowl, yeah, you can kind of hear somebody a little bit. You don't hear them at 55 decibels. You don't hear them at 37 decibels, but you hear them. But it's to be expected. I moved somewhere where there absolutely was an existing bar use. If this was a bar coming up against the back of my residence, my neighbors, 4 of the HOA board members either live along that wall or removed by one home, are all a little more than concerned. The building has not been vacant for 39 months. One of the units, True West, has been vacant for 39 months. The other 2 moved into another part of the same complex to allow the building to be unified. I think the business is a great business. I love dogs. I've got 2 dogs. My concern is my dogs are going to be barking back at 30 dogs at any one time. If this was just a neighbor with 30 dogs, a house, I don't think anybody here would have any question that it was going to be out of control. Now, I appreciate the fact that it's finally moved on to another side of the building, but the hard nature of the glass and concrete will create a reflection of that. Your decibel decreases every 6 decibels, every doubling of the footage. It's not that much when a dog bark starts out between 75 and 90 decibels. A yelling person's only 60 decibels. That's fantastic.
Please continue.
I do not believe that myself or any member of my community is served well by becoming a guinea pig when you realize that other Dogtopias are not in this kind of commercial zoning. They're in industrial zoning or further commercial. If this was several doors down, if this was at the KFC, which is 300, 400 yards away, no, you wouldn't hear anything. Nobody in my community would have said a word. It wasn't even something that it was brought to my attention by neighbors across the street that are concerned. And it's not a fair diminishment of my property for me to gamble my peace and quiet because someone else wishes to open something something that needs a conditional use permit. I could have just as easily moved into a county land and great, I'd have to put up with it, but I didn't. I moved into Gilbert with an expectation that things like conditional use permits were truly based on a respect for the property values of everybody that is invested, including the applicant. But I don't think it's a reasonable expectation for anyone, especially along that wall, to assume they're not going to be affected in a manner that will diminish the value of their property, diminish the ability to sell their property at some point or anything. I would hope that economic development in the town would be able to guide them into a suitable property because it's a great idea. Hell, who doesn't like dogs, really? If you don't like dogs, there's a problem with you. But 30 dogs is not my idea of a neighbor right now. And I don't want to be coming back here in 3 months saying, well, we had this discussion and guess who was right? Me. Because nobody here is going to be willing to bond up and buy my house and move me. And it's going to be awful. If we're going to sit there with several neighbors that are all going to have the same complaint, if I'm even remotely correct. Or, as their sound consultant said, well, we can go to 55 decibels at that window. That's louder than a speaking voice, and that's not fair. Any questions I would truly appreciate.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions for citizens? We usually don't do questions to citizens, but if anybody has one, we all know Jim well enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
follow my order here. At this time, the applicant does have the option to respond to anything that's been said. I think you may have covered it already, but thank you. And does staff have any additional? Dad, thank you. At this time, we'll turn it back to council. I think Councilmember Peterson and then Councilmember Taylor.
Mayor Daniels, if I may,
Yes.
just the answer to Councilmember Cook's question.
Oh, please, yeah.
With a little help from Chief Solberg, it's in section 6.2, noisy animals, and it does require the complaint of two separate households in order for the complaint to be filed for noisy dogs or noisy.
Thank you.
I had a question about the noise study. So the estimate you said was 37 decibels. Is that's at the peak when the dogs are barking? Or
Yes.
is that, okay. That's
So-
not an average, it's not like an average decibel. That's like with the dogs barking, you're stimulating barking and estimating from that.
That's correct. I probably should have clarified that in my presentation. When he takes a baseline at the other facilities, they incited the dogs and activated dogs to simulate that noise barking so they could then create a good baseline. When he came to this site, he can make the measurements at the property line and at the home. And then they make the measurement, which is a projection to the interior of the residence.
Is the noise consultant here by chance?
Tony Sola is not here, but only because he already had commitments prior to this hearing being
Well,
decided.
let me ask you a question you may not be able to answer, but I'll try.
Okay.
Am I right in my research that 37 decibels would be somewhere between a whisper and a light rain as
Correct.
far as sound level? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Adam, don't go too far. I just had a quick question for Adam, then I'd just like to hear other thoughts. Can you tell us what sound abatement strategies are being used, at least internally?
Absolutely. I have a sheet that I've anticipated this question. So a couple of things they've done. I think it's not just the outside, which we focused on, but some of the inside as well. So for example, they're usually using acoustically absorptive materials inside the interior space. And these were recommendations that came from the sound consultant as well. They've also been willing to enclose a doorway on the inside, which should also trap some of the room to travel from the back. The walls themselves were pre-insulated long before this applicant came to own the property. So those are some mechanisms that were both in the existing construction and which they can incorporate as part of their tenant improvements to address some of those noises. And again, it's worth pointing out there are no windows on the eastern side of the building that would face Mr. Torgerson's home.
Thank you.
Just one question, Adam. So the site plan that you show differs from the one that staff was showing us. So that's the compromise one, pulling that all back. Is that correct?
That is correct. What that does, I should probably also clarify, it doesn't just pull it back to the edge of the building, it pulls it back to the edge of the overhang too. So less noise is going up as much as it is less noise going out.
So I'm the council member that filed the appeal, obviously, based on the neighborhood letter and their concern. And since that time, I had the chance to meet with Brett and Tina and Adam. We walked the facility. It was very hot. But I do appreciate their time and efforts and spending time. And it became apparent very quickly that they were wanting to be community partners and wanting to make this work. And I get part of it as they have a business, and they in the end, their goal is to make money, and that's expected. But for them to make these changes, I appreciate it. I had the opportunity to go to both the Arcadia store and the Phoenix store unannounced and sit in my truck outside in the parking lot and listen, and I was pleasantly surprised. I heard a dog bark occasionally, but it was far quieter than my backyard where I have dogs who live behind me. And so I appreciate their efforts and their willingness to talk about this and to make changes that I think will be very beneficial. And we talked also about the idea that this is a conditional use permit. And if the stipulations aren't followed, and if there are complaints, the conditional use permit can be revoked. and very likely would be revoked. And there was no question in their mind about that. And so I appreciate the changes that they've been willing to make. It's extra money out of their pockets to do this, but I think it will be a benefit to the neighbors to have these changes. And so I am in, I don't know if we're supposed to say our opinion yet, Mayor, with our new rules that we have, that we're following tonight. I'm in favor of the project now, based on the changes. And if we get to a point where the rules are not being followed and we need to look at the conditional use permit, that's expected by both the town and the owner. And then as to Mr. Torgerson's comments about the sound code that we have, I do think that's appropriate to look at. That's a different discussion. We can't decide that tonight. But I do think that we have some concerns and some potential flaws there that we'll move forward with to talk about on another meeting. But I do appreciate the applicant and their willingness to make these changes for the betterment of the neighbors.
Thank you. Councilmember Cook?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to try to paint kind of a word picture here for all of us that might be real simple. As you know, me being a musician, I'm going to use the musician perspective here. So when you have a orchestra and you have a single violin, and I'm in the audience listening, that violin player will play, a certain note at a certain volume. And then I add a second violin player, and it seems like it gets a little louder. And then I add a third, and then I add a fourth, and I add a fifth. So I'm not a sound expert or engineer, but I do know the cumulative number of violin players from the first one to maybe 10 or maybe 20. That's why we have an orchestra, because it fills the room with sound. I look at this very similarly, that I may have one barking dog, which might be fine, but if I start adding the second or the third or the fourth, I now have an orchestra of barking dogs. And I'm not saying that the current sound abatement of this property, because unfortunately I was not able to go see the other two sites, but I do know that the current ambient noise added with what I saw in the report of an additional 60 decibels to the other 68 is a cumulative, and it will become louder. So I wish that sound engineer was here, because I would ask some more technical questions about it, because I feel that there's a possibility that the piece of the backyard of those neighbors would be not as quiet as it was before. I'm probably not going to be in favor of this particular proposal. But I do have a question about the outdoor kennel run as relates to the business owners. And I'm not saying that you should, is there a possibility to remove it? Is that part of a must-have versus a nice-to-have as part of your business? But it seems like if the neighbors did not have, or did not, if that part was not part of the business, that might be a possible win-win for everybody. But again, it may be, from your business perspective, that's not an option. I don't know. So that would be my question. Is there, or you put a roof on it or a ceiling over so there's no sound coming out? I'm just curious if that's even an option. Again, it may be against your business plan that you must have. I don't know.
Hi, I'm Tina Edenfield, owner of Dogtopia Gilbert. The outdoor area is actually really a necessity for those dogs. It's for their well-being. It's for a change of scenery. Some of the dogs are going to be with us all day, and it's just a break up in their routine, and they do better outside. And the fact that if there were barking dogs outside, we have in place measures to take them inside. I would never let 30 dogs just be barking and howling out there all day. That's just not even part of what we would do. So we already have those measures in place. But for the well-being of the pups that are with us all day, it's a necessity.
Thank you.
Thank
Tina.
you.
Any other? Vice Mayor?
Mayor, thank you. I was at the Planning Commission hearing, so I heard all of the conversations, and Ms. Edenfeld, sorry, when she did her presentation and when Mr. Torgerson spoke, and the Planning Commissioners did a great job hearing everything that the neighbors were saying and made some great adjustments. And then I think that the owners have gone back and made some more great adjustments. And I agree with the sounds and the decibels. I remember when we first had this discussion in Gilbert, so long ago, that Don Skousen was sitting on this dais, and they did a decibel reading from the back of the room when Don Skousen spoke, and it was 85. Don's speaking voice to the back of the room through the microphone here on the dais. And that shocked me because I thought, how could Don's voice be an 85 right here in this room? And I get that. And I was just thinking, I live with 4 backyards, mine and 3 others, and there's a combination of probably 7 or 8 dogs between us, and I have 2. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm only a dog person, though I have both dogs and cats. And just to clarify, and sometimes they bark, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're annoying, sometimes they're not. My dog's gone to boarding places. My dog's gone to doggy daycare. Sometimes they're inside and they bark, and one will bark and nobody else does because the dogs don't care. And sometimes they all start to bark, but the staff does a great job to calm them down, separate them if they need to. And I believe that this owner will do the same thing, especially based on the fact that this is a conditional use permit and we can remove it if need be. But I think that this business wants to be successful in our community, and we should give her that opportunity to be successful. And I know that lots of people use doggy daycare and boarding. I just leaned over to the mayor and said, last year when I was remodeling my house, my dog went to daycare every single day to get it out of the house while the work people were there. So it's a great use to have in our community, and I hope that, and I know that you will be great neighbors to Mr. Torgerson.
Thank you.
Mayor, a lot of people who know me well know that I'm pretty passionate about property rights, that I'm pretty supportive of uses. Even under conditional use permit scenarios, I'm generally supportive. And so, but I will say the one thing that I think is a substantive issue when it comes to use and enjoyment of property is noise. So I took this very seriously. I want everyone to know I took this very seriously. I took time to visit both sites. That took a long time. It's quite a drive. And I also did so unannounced. Purposefully did not let them know when I was going. And I did the same kind of thing I think Councilmember Ray did. Listening, waiting to see. I even walked, outside, behind, around, anywhere I could go to get a sense of the noise. I also took a tour of one of the facilities, the second one I went to try and get a sense of the operation, how it worked, how the dogs responded to stimulus, being me. Just get a sense of things. One of the things that I observed, I thought was, first of all, the facilities are very professionally run. They're, again, unannounced, and they were just absolutely gleaming, clean, professionally run. I also noticed they have cameras up everywhere so people can actually see their dogs any time of the day. It's quite a service. So, but using this experience, one of the things I observed is the dogs generally don't bark until presented with an unfamiliar stimulus, being me. So if somebody goes up to them and someone unfamiliar, then they'll bark. But otherwise, they generally wouldn't bark. And even sometimes they wouldn't bark if you kind of walk by them. So I think it's a really important and great idea that the windows to the outer area have been taken away. I think that's really good idea. So that was my experience. So I think the amount of barking that you can expect from the facility is probably going to be, obviously there's going to be some barking. These are dogs. But I think in any given hour, it's going to be a very small fraction of the hour that you're going to have any barking. That's one thing. The other thing I'll say is, I do take seriously the noise issue, but I can sleep through a light rain. And I am one of the lightest sleepers on the planet. I can sleep through a light rain. So I think it is not an infringement upon the use and enjoyment of property for that level of noise, especially when it's mostly going to be daytime hours if there is noise. So when there's noise, which I think will be rare, the loudest it would ever get is quieter than a light rain. I don't think that that's an infringement. I know Mr. Torgerson, he's a good friend of mine, and he may not be happy with me for this, but this is just me based on the facts and what I think is reasonable. And so, Mayor, with all that, I'm sorry to ramble a little bit, but I want the appellant to know I took it very seriously. And I think based on the data and the facts, this will not be a negative detriment in any impactful or significant way to the neighbors. And so with that, Mayor, I'm in support.
Thank you, Councilmember Peterson. Any other comments from the rest of our council? Councilmember Anderson.
Just very briefly, I too had the opportunity to visit the sites as well as Pete and Max and some other sites here locally. I did the same thing, sat and listened for quite a while, and I must say that each one of the uses that I visited, I really wouldn't know what was happening in there if I didn't know that, what the business was. So in that respect, I think they are all done in a very professional manner, and I expect that this one would be the same way. And I do feel that our codes are written so that as we make decisions, it helps us make decisions that I believe are reasonably tied to private investment or will stimulate private investment. And I think that's the case here. Our codes are very focused when it comes to conditional use permits, and has already been mentioned, if we stray from the approval of that conditional use permit, we can always bring it back and revoke it if we need to. And I think that we need to take a stand in this particular case where someone is willing to invest in a property that apparently, whether it's been vacant for however many months or years that was referenced, I think it's time that we get that building filled.
Mayor, thank you. I had multiple conversations with Mr. Torgerson on this, and appreciate his interest and support of his community and representing his community. And one way, and I'd like to just explain my vote here on this, because what I left pretty much every conversation with is similar to what we heard with Councilmember Peterson, is they need their day in court too. They have rights too, just like he has rights, just like his neighbors have rights. And my job is to go in and investigate what rights, if any, and is there any evidence that individual rights of quiet and enjoyment are being violated or will be violated. What evidence exists? That's all we can really, really weigh in on. So I'm not going to repeat, but I do agree conditional use permit is important. It keeps them on a short leash. If I can have a rim shot there, Eddie. Like you guys, I went to the Arcadia. I didn't go to the Scottsdale one, but visited with Joanne there and took a tour, and a delightful person, and saw a little husky roll around with a French bulldog, and that was really fun. And it was beach day, Mayor. They had water out, and the dogs were playing in the ponds. And anyways, it was fun to see. They were monitored at every single step. The place is very quiet, unless, of course, as Victor said, there was a distraction, an unfamiliar. No, I didn't get to hear the outside because it was 113 today. So being responsible, they had them inside. So I appreciate that. But the fact that it was quiet, it was monitored nonstop, made an impression on me. In fact, I was in the lobby. I couldn't hear anything. In the lobby, I couldn't hear anything out. And I want to touch on this idea of quiet enjoyment, right? Does quiet mean silent? I don't think it does. I don't think quiet means silent, right? We live next to people that have dogs. We buy homes near roads. And so it doesn't necessarily mean silent. And so I compared that to the operating hours that Dogtopia has and how they would monitor, and I appreciated that. I mean, poor Tina, I drilled her on the sound stuff so much, she probably got tired of me. And I appreciate that visit, but they have barking protocols. I never know there were barking protocols. And so when they do reach levels of potential nuisance, because they have constant monitoring, things are addressed there. So I appreciated that education and what they were doing there. My daughter always begs me for a Bichon or an Affenpinscher, but we're a fish people at our house. And so maybe I'll be a good dad someday and get her a Bichon. Bottom line, Mayor, we've approved things that have much worse sound issues in this town than this is going to be, like Whiskey Row, right? You can hear Whiskey Row's noise from Neely Elementary, right? And Jim, you and I have talked about this a lot, right? I mean, so this is the least of our worries when we talk about sound codes and things like that, because there's other things that are a lot worse than this in the town. And I'm not just comparing it to the other dog properties here. So Mayor, I'm supportive of this. I didn't see any evidence that they're going to be violating, but if there is evidence and it's credible and it can come forward to us, then the conditional use permit will act like it's supposed to be and operate under the conditional law. So Mayor, I appreciate the time, and I'll be supporting this tonight if moved.
Thank you, and I won't prolong the vote. It's easy to count, but I am happy to support this project as well. I kind of feel like a slacker. I didn't realize everybody was going to visit the sites, but I'm grateful for my council for doing so much of that research. But I did hear from several individuals who were very much in support of this, and I understand some of the concerns, but I am grateful for the work that's been done to mitigate those concerns, both by design and also through policy and protocol. So thank you for doing that. And without further ado, I will close the public hearing on this agenda item and entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and make a motion I will move to uphold the Planning Commission's approval of UP 18-04 Dogtopia, a conditional use permit to allow a dog daycare center on approximately 1.2 acres of real property located at 207 East Williamsfield Road and zoned shopping center with a planned area development overlay, subject to the conditions.
I want to make sure that we add, Vice Mayor, the additional changes that they've agreed to since the planning case.
I would take that recommendation and amend my motion to include any of the changes that have been made that were presented this evening by Mr. Baugh.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. That motion carries with a 6-1 vote. Thank you. I was notified that I failed on one of these agenda items, so I'm going to ask politely to the council that we reconsider agenda item 22 as part of our public hearing items, and then I will reopen the public hearing. And the item did not provide enough clarity, I believe, and so I'd ask our town attorney, Chris Payne, to assist us in making sure that we provide enough clarity through our motion. So the first step would be to reconsider that vote. Do I have a motion to reconsider?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote to reconsider. That motion carries with a 7-0 vote. Thank you. I will open the public hearing on agenda item 22 and look to our attorney to assist.
Mayor Daniels, council members, this item involves the rezoning of a parcel of land. Council communication provides for two different motions that could be made. The first one is to deny the adoption of the resolution and the ordinance, and that's the staff recommendation. And then the Planning Commission recommendation, their motion is to move to adopt the resolution and make the findings of fact that are in the ordinance. So those are the two different motions before the council.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson?
Thank you, Mayor. The reason I didn't think anything of this is because I'm in favor of approving it, and that's kind of the way we had worded it. So, but I can appreciate that it could be seen as ambiguous. So, Mayor, I'm in favor of approving as the ordinance there, the general plan and zoning as recommended by our Planning Commission. So. But I can move that.
Is that
I
enough
didn't know if there was going to be more
information for
discussion.
you?
Yes,
For our
that's-
attorney?
that's sufficient.
And clerk, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. That's what the motion just was.
Second.
Yes.
May I ask a question? Is it option 1 or option 2 that's?
Option 2 is what's been the
Option 2.
motion
Got
that
it.
has
Thank you.
been made.
Appreciate it.
So option 2, there is a motion by Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
a second by Councilmember Taylor. Please vote. That motion carries with a 7-0 vote, and I swear I closed the public hearing on that agenda item before we voted. So pretend like I did. Thank you. Appreciate it. A lot of papers up here that we're shuffling, so thank you for everyone's patience tonight. All right, that moves us to administrative items. We have taken care of agenda item 31 and 32, and now we'll discuss agenda item 33, which is the adoption of a resolution to approve the official name of the parks currently referred to as Gilbert Regional Park and Rittenhouse District Park. Our interim Parks and Rec Director, Robert Carmona, is here to assist us.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for having us. This is a really exciting item for Parks and Recreation. I think the whole community, whenever you go through a park naming process, it really is a community effort. So we do want to thank the community, the council, the Parks Board, and Digital Gov and Jacob Ellis for all the work they did to get us to this point. It's really exciting. We're a few weeks away from actually reaching complete design for both of these parks. So we're really excited to be able to place these names into the plans and really start to show the progress. So with that being said, we went to the public a couple of months ago and asked for park names. We had about 245 responses, in which case the Parks Board narrowed that down and brought it back to the council. Council narrowed that down again, and then we took those names and went out to a public vote online, and we had about 3,000 responses. So a lot of excitement in the community for these items, and without further ado, we'll give you some of those results of those as we go through. So for the park currently known as Rittenhouse District Park, the options were Desert Sky Park and Power Sports Park, and Desert Sky Park had a 73% to 27% vote gathering for that one. And in the closest vote, we did have a vote separated by about 11 votes between Gilbert Regional Park and Gilbert Centennial, with Gilbert Regional just edging out Gilbert Centennial. So at this point, this item is back to council to be able to approve the park names, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify, I was just asked by our vice mayor how many times I voted, and I just want people to know I didn't vote. I knew I was going to have my vote here. So just for the record, I did not try to influence the outcome of the vote in any way, shape, or form.
Mayor and council does log IP addresses, so we could verify. If needed.
Excellent. If necessary, thank you.
I'm going to be just like usual and be out of the gate on this and probably be quiet for the rest of the discussion, but this is not a matter of principle. And so in this case, while I don't love Desert Sky Park, it's clearly the favorite between the two, so I'm in favor of that. Let's go to the other slide. Let me ask you a question, Robert. What is the margin of error on this survey?
We are at about 0.1%
yeah,
between
right.
the two.
Okay. Yeah, a random sample is required in order to properly ascertain anything like a actual margin of error. I was making a bit of a joke there. My point being, this is close enough in my mind that I'm going to go with my favorite, and that is Gilbert Centennial Park. Thanks, Mayor.
Well, we're glad we got your votes out of the way. Thank you, Councilmember Peterson. Anyone else have passionate feelings about our park names? I know Councilmember Taylor does.
Mayor, thank you. You already got an email from me on this. I don't know where these, I mean, I know where they came from, but why did we narrow them down to two? I don't know. Centennial is my favorite. The other one, I can go with that one too. I do like how it ties to our Centennial celebration. I think there's a good tie. Regional is just so vanilla. Something, right? But in going through these, there were two others that I really liked. If I could just put out here for consideration. Well, I guess there's one that I saw a couple of times, Liberty Park. I do like having Gilbert in it, so Gilbert Liberty Park. I saw that come up a couple of times. I mean, that just has some substance to it, just like the word centennial. You know, it's a fun marker in our history. But I didn't see this one. I'd just like to throw this out for our thought, is Gilbert Family Park. And when I was on the liaison to the Parks Board and we started to do the different exercises, and one of the things that I shared as a vision that I'd like to see at this park is that it fills up our family history books with great memories. And so I'm not going to go on and on about that, but I just think this is a place where it'll strengthen the offensive team that you hear me talk about, which is our family. So putting that out there for our considerations. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, originally in the parks meetings, the one that I was hoping for was because this is part of the Santan character area. And I was hoping it would have like Gilbert Santan, park in it. But what I've learned was that directly south, because it looked at the Santan Mountains, right? Well, the Santan Mountains is part of what's called the Santan Regional Park. And I said, darn it, it's already been taken. So I'm leaning toward the Gilbert Regional Park as my choice on that. Oh, the other one, well, it was interesting. Those two were not even on my list. So that was a funnier story. That wasn't on my list. If you go back to the Rittenhouse name, let me just give you a little bit of history. The Power Sports name kind of materialized from the Parks Board because of all the sports fields, because this was going to be a dominant sports field and it was along Power Road. So that was kind of the reason the Power Sports Park came out, Power Road, and it would literally be just mostly sports fields. So that was the reason why the Power Sports Park came up as the option from the Parks and Recs Board.
So for what I call the regional park, I don't like Centennial Park because Chandler already has Centennial Park that's almost exactly 5 miles due west of us. Same south portion, et cetera. And having a Gilbert Centennial Park and a Chandler, I get the Centennial idea and I like it. Unfortunately, Chandler beat us to the Centennial. And so I think it causes confusion by having a park that's due east 5 miles to have the same name. So I prefer the regional park name based on that. I don't like either of them.
I don't know that we're going to ever.
No, we're not.
Get this
That's my
done.
problem.
But we are going to make a decision.
We can put this
tonight,
out to vote
Council.
100 times. We're going to get different answers every time. Via Facebook, which we know people get very excited on. They didn't seem to like either one of the names. So I would go with what won out of the two based on the fact that we put this out. It won overwhelmingly. And so I would go with that name.
So, Mayor, I feel the same way as Councilmember Ray with the Centennial Park. I think it's too close to Chandler Centennial Park. Maybe if we were like kicking this park off in the middle of our centennial, I might feel a little bit stronger about it. But the first phase should open next year, which is a year before our centennial, technically. And I hate the Desert Sky Park. I would rather Power Sports, but so I would like Gilbert Regional and Power Sports. Those are my choices.
Mayor,
I am. We're good.
Mayor, members of the council, if it would help, Chris and I could throw out a compromise name of the Bangor
Let's not.
Payne Park, if you'd like to consider that.
The what?
I was telling somebody that naming these parks feels very permanent. Something similar maybe to getting a tattoo. Now I could never get a tattoo, so because I couldn't ever decide what I really wanted. That seems so permanent, and so here you have it.
Been there, done that.
We are trying to name a park, and this is an important process. But I think the people really have spoken, and I do love our desert skies. There are no sunsets better than Arizona sunsets, and this will be a beautiful place to see and view that. So I'm fine with that. I'm also fine with naming it Gilbert Regional Park, recognizing that is close. I like Centennial Park because of the recognition that it does mark our centennial, but I understand. And in all honesty, at some point down the road, we may be looking at this from a branding perspective, and it might be easier to rebrand Gilbert Regional Park than it would be to rebrand Gilbert Centennial Park if we ever acquired a sponsor or something. I used to think I had way more opinions about this, but now that we've talked about it ad nauseum for the last 4 months, I decided I'm not as passionate as I was at one point. So with all that being said, Vice Mayor is dying to make a motion. Let's hear it.
I'm going to move that we accept the names as they were presented by the vote. So Gilbert Regional Park and Desert Skies Park.
Second.
It was Desert Sky.
Whatever.
Single.
Desert Sky
I will
Park.
second
Thank
that.
you.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Thank you. It's unanimous. That is a 7-0 vote.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We'll
Thank
spread the
you.
word.
Thank you. I was touch and go there for a minute.
I was tempted to be that one no vote, but you know.
I'm so grateful that that was
What?
unanimous.
I thought he was going to pull out a bread sheet when he started
but I
talking
have
about statistics on the vote.
I have a cats and dog joke.
No, not right now.
Yeah.
Let's
Oh, yeah.
hold it
It's good.
for the next section of our meeting when I've left. Thank you. Our next is boards, commissions, and committee reports from council liaisons. Are there any board, commission, and committee reports? Councilmember Cook.
Well, I have now been promoted to the chair of the MAG DV Council because interim Mayor Thelda Williams is now so busy with Phoenix, with all her new responsibilities, she can no longer be in that role. So I just will share that with the council. It's a great honor and a privilege to serve, as the chair for, a team that's trying to end domestic violence regionally. So it's a real privilege and honor to do that.
Thank you. Any other boards, commission, or committee reports? We have no additional policy items and a couple items that will be considered as part of our future meeting, in a future meeting. Report from our town manager on current events.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Chris and I would still respectfully request possibly the Banger Pane public restrooms at one of the parks, if you're open to suggestions.
That seems appropriate.
Couple quick announcements tonight. This week, we had celebrated the retirements of two very long-time Gilbert employees and members of Team Gilbert. Vicki Songer, who was our longtime executive secretary to the mayor and council, who did a wonderful job in that role and was really a fixture. And we wish Monica, who has accepted that position, she was taken away from our prosecutor's office, who was not pleased with that announcement, but we wish Vicki well. And then Pat Hooper, who has been at the front desk at Gilbert Town Hall for a long time. I can't even remember, 2003 possibly?
It started in 1995.
1995. So a very long time. So a well-earned retirement for both of them. They'll both be missed. They were really way for our organization.
So Patrick, I have a question.
Yes.
Is there therapy type of counseling or sessions? Because I'm obviously really suffering from, Vicki being lost. Is there anything for council to go to?
I'm going to refer you to Jolene Fleck after this.
Councilmember Cook, there is, but there is an extreme backlog from all the employees that have to work with me on a regular basis, so you can get in the queue. Next, I want to congratulate Kyle Mears and his entire team who have been working diligently with Dignity Health and Phoenix Children's Hospital. It was just approved this week for the addition of their new 6-story, 365,000 square foot hospital tower addition, and it's going to bring wonderful services to our community and our families, and a great addition to Gilbert. Next, I'd like to thank Mary Goodman, Nancy Davidson, Chris Payne, Jessica Marlowe, Mark Horn, and Jean Jensen for the great work on the buffer lease that was approved tonight. That was actually a very complicated transaction, and they spent a lot of time on that, digging into the details with our municipal partners, Mesa and Queen Creek, at the Greenfield Wastewater Treatment Plant, and it's going to be a wonderful amenity to secure the use of that for our soccer fields and the Gilbert Youth Soccer Association, as well as some addition to that. So thank you to each of them for the great work. And then lastly, as we're all aware, we lost a very valued member of Team Gilbert in Gilbert Fire and Rescue Battalion Chief James Nelson. This is not the time, but you can't say enough about who James was as a person and an employee and what he meant to everybody in the organization and how deeply his loss is being felt. He was the best that we have to offer as employees serving this community. It was unexpected and sudden, but we keep his family in our thoughts and prayers and wish them all the best as they deal with their loss as well.
Thank you. Report from council on current events.
This seems a little bit insignificant after Patrick's comments, but I do want to recognize the employees at the town, the great things that they do. Just a couple of examples this week, and these happen all the time, but a number of us were at Kohl's, where we got to be with dozens and dozens of firefighters and admin who who went in on their days off to help underprivileged kids go shopping. And then on Saturday, I believe it was, I got to go with Mary Goodman and Robert Carmona very early in the morning to meet with a bunch of Boy Scouts. And they had gone and prepared a presentation on a Saturday morning, which would be their, hopefully a day off for them. But to all the staff who work so hard, some of which we see, some of which we don't. But we as council members and as residents, we appreciate what you do.
And I just want to tie into that. I'm going to go with the team, our team, to the San Carlos Apache Reservation like I did last year on August 11th to take some of those backpacks up there. So,
just a couple of things that are related to tourism and development in town. One is we just received word that the revenue collected through the hotels is way up. I guess this last reporting period could be even higher if we hadn't cut that, but that's okay.
Sounds like we can bring it down lower now.
Yeah. Thank you. The other tourism-related item is, I don't know if you're all aware, but our observatory in the Riparian Preserve has been recognized by Airbnb as a top 5 location in North America as a destination for astrotourism. People like to do stargazing. And not only is it in the top 5 in North America, but it's in the top in the world. It's one of the top sites to go to in the world, rated by Airbnb. So it's another big thing for Gilbert.
That's terrific. We'll have to share that far and wide. Councilmember Taylor?
Mayor, just two quick items. Just on the park, Mr. Torgerson's asking for the urinal to be named after him. So I told him, no, we're going to name the dog park after him. You know he's got a good sense of humor. Thank you for being down here. Second item, it's election season, so the 2 people left that are watching this meeting, we encourage you to vote. Tell 10 of your friends to get out and vote. There's a lot of great people running. Please learn about them and participate in the process. We'd love to have you input. The strength of our community is our families and the people that come out and support what we do here, Mayor. So thank you for the time.
Thank you.
One thing.
Please.
If anybody didn't see, we had a very big announcement from Valley Metro and Waymo this week with a combination partnership of Waymo providing service to Valley Metro employees. We're hashtagging first mile, last mile to get employees where they're going in the Southeast Valley, and that will affect and impact people in Gilbert too, because we do share the border so closely with Chandler, and Waymo is kind of flowing over into our borders at this point, and it was a really big, huge announcement for us on Tuesday.
Thank you very much. I just want to remind people that all 3 of our public school districts are now in session, so please be aware. I did see lots of our motors out, making sure that people were obeying speed limits within school zones. And within the next couple of weeks, all of our Gilbert schools, including our charter and our private schools, will all be in session. So just a quick reminder to keep your speed down and your eyes up and drive safely. Another note, August is Drowning Impact Awareness Month, and many of us are wearing purple ribbons here to commemorate that. It's a top cause of injury-related death for Arizona children, and there are lots of steps that can be taken to prevent drownings, and August is a high-risk month. So there are lots of opportunities for us to look out for children, especially around water. Please assist us in that effort. Our first responders also appreciate us sharing and spreading the word that we've got to protect our children. So please help us do that. With that, and with a very sad goodbye to both Pat Hooper and Vicki Songer, I'm hoping we'll see more of them. I already told them we were recruiting both of them for general plan update. I'm not sure if they're willing, but we do appreciate the many years of service they provided to the town. And with that, I think the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.